drawing architecture by trying to capture its effect is the same really as drawing anything, particularly details, by drawing the effect of the details, not the exactness of the details. We're trying to draw the architecture not by drawing it exactly, but by capturing the main visual points of it. What jumps at us when we see it? What are the key visual elements of this architecture, of this scene, and how can we use that to find marks to create the essence of that? Because that will also let us draw the architecture that we're looking at in a somewhat abbreviated way, which stylistically can be very appealing, and it's also a great way of thinking and drawing when we don't have much time. So it particularly is useful for street sketching. Now, this church in London, this drawing took me 20 minutes to draw in real time. So it's only very slightly, it's only a quarter as fast again at this point up until I get to the foliage, and then I double speed it just for the foliage part because that did occupy a fair amount of time. I have lots and lots of videos on drawing foliage and drawing foliage through trying to capture the overall effect, not starting to draw individual leaves. But how do we apply this way of thinking to architecture? So I look at this scene and visually, what is it I see? I see the geometric nature of these stacked shapes, stacked upwards and outwards. And I also see a lot of dark areas, a lot of shadows. And because of my knowledge of architecture and how it looks in the world under different conditions, the shadows give me as much information as seeing the actual objects. I don't so much see the outline of those windows as I see the dark shape that the absence of stonework creates. And so drawing the shadows, drawing the dark areas is often a way of creating the effect of the architecture. It can also be an easier way to get a sense of the proportions. And once I've drawn these key elements, the things that stand out, and to me the columns stand out, particularly in the lower half of the tower and the main part of the church. The columns stand out and the entablatures stand out because of the horizontal banding we have there. And some of the bases stand out where their shadows are being caught by cornices and so forth. These are the key things to try and get. The other thing that stands out really clearly that's important for the visual grab of this particular church is the symmetry. There's a center point and it's the same left and right, and also the silhouette of this tower, this really remarkably tall, slender, and I think very elegant stacked tower. And so one of the really important things, if we're going to capture the feel of this, is we want a really tight spire. We want it to be nice and symmetrical, and we want it to line up exactly on the center line. So that gives me a focus, and the way I did it, and you can see me just starting to do it now, is to take advantage of the fact that these darkened areas, these arch-shaped spaces, whether it's a window down below or a belfry in the middle where the bells are, or a see-through part above for the two sections above that, is to actually use those as my center line and to take just a little bit more time positioning those arched spaces as I went up, because if I get those right and then I do whatever pilasters or whatever is on each side of them, my tower is going to stay straight. And so there are some parts of our drawing that pay greater dividends for paying attention to. Now, the other important thing is to make sure that left and right then of these arch spaces are basically equal in terms of line work and width. And there were a few places where they just didn't line up equally from left to right. And so I would simply add another line wherever it was needed on the left or the right side to widen that space, so at a glance the tower rather, looks symmetrical. The fact that that line doesn't line up with another line to create a whole shape doesn't matter, because we're not drawing this precisely, we're creating the effect. And so it's how it seems overall which is going to matter, not any one tiny part. We're looking at this as a whole, not as the bits. Because with a complex structure such as this, with so many parts, we see the overall shape rather than the individual components. And so it's capturing that overall shape that's important. It's going to be our proportions that matter, and the silhouettes. And as I said, in this case, the silhouette of this tower, this spire, is, I think it's more a tower than a spire, is very straight. So I need to make sure my outside lines are very straight as well. Now, besides the architecture, the other thing that's very important in this scene is the contrast between the architecture and the foliage. And there is also this person walking along. Now, while there are a couple of other figures, they're quite further back and they're very small. I decided just to put this one figure in the front, in the foreground, because I thought he would be an interesting addition for scale and just to bring our viewing of the scene lower down and closer down to us. So you see how that's just not centered happily over the whole thing, and the platform that it sits on isn't very centered. So I'm just now fiddling with it a little bit because it's going to be the silhouette that matters. So yeah, I got two lines there now, notice, on the left hand side, but that's far less obvious than if I'd left it with one line but had my silhouette out of kilter, in effect looking like that little dome bit on top was tilting to the side. So now I need to work out where are these gate posts going to be, because they're also visually quite an important part. Now, if I was spending a little more time on this, because I was trying to keep it a fairly quick drawing, I'd have put a little more contrast around the gate posts just to make them stand out more. In fact, I think I will do it after I finish doing this voiceover. And if you want to have a look at the thumbnail and compare the thumbnail with this scene, you'll see the difference that it makes. I think because making objects stand out by darkening the spaces around them, as long as that makes sense for what we're looking at, is a really great way to just capture visually the feel, the effect of something, to highlight certain parts without actually overdrawing them, and a great help in creating the feel of the detail without actually drawing the detail. So in a moment we will speed up. Please hit that like button if you're finding this interesting. I think of drawing basically fundamentally not as copying shapes, not as outlining shapes that I see in a reference, but of seeing certain visual effects that are influenced by the material things are made of, by their shapes, by the lighting, by how far away they are, and so forth, surface textures, and then what marks will capture those effects in my drawing. What marks will create the visual feel of what I'm seeing, because obviously I couldn't draw the detail that I can see in this photo, even with this 0.1 millimeter pen that I'm using, Unipin fine liner that I'm using. I could not draw all the detail I can see because my my line width, my mark width is simply too wide to fit all the information in. So I have to make adjustments. I have to abbreviate in some way. But the key thing is to make choices with what and how we abbreviate, so that the key elements visually are there to create the feeling that we're looking at all the detail. This is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about drawing the effect. But before we can draw the effect, we have to see the effect. We have to analyze our scene, saying, what is it that gives me the information? Big picture, not getting bogged down in the detail, not trying to draw the details. So you can see with this tree now on the left-hand side, I'm certainly not trying to draw leaves anywhere. But I'm also not outlining a silhouette of the tree. I'm starting to find some marks to express some of the lights and darks. So I'm drawing through creating shade and shadow, light and dark areas that are manipulated so as to give the feeling of a canopy that's catching the light in certain ways. I'm paying particular attention to the marks on the very edge of the silhouette, because one of the ways we get information, if you like, a shortcut way of working out what we're looking at, is to go for the silhouettes, the edges of objects, because that often tells us an awful lot quickly and easily. So that's what I'm trying to find now at this point. As I said, I have a playlist on drawing trees where the trees are the main event, not standing on the wings on the side of the stage, as in this case, where there's a lot more detail explaining seeing and finding marks to capture the effect of the foliage. And not just a generic tree, which is this kind, what this sort of is. It's pretty much a generic tree. You'd be hard pressed to recognize what this particular tree was from my drawing. I presume it's a London plane tree, looking at the photo. But I have videos on different types of trees: pine trees, fir trees, palm trees, bare trees, when the leaves aren't there at all, how we capture the effect of the branches, and then lots of trees combining the two. Small trees, very large trees, in between trees. So check out that playlist if you struggle with foliage at all. And so now, getting towards the end, please hit that like button if you haven't already. And if you'd like to have a go drawing this church, then you'll find this reference photo on my channel post page, and there is a link in the video description that will take you straight to it. What do you think? G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. I had a lot of fun drawing this. It's the sort of architecture I really enjoy drawing. I hope you enjoyed watching it. I hope you have a go drawing it yourself. But in the end, whatever you draw and however it turns out, make sure that you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye. And here we are. Don't forget to check the difference between this and my thumbnail. See you next time. Bye.